we've been working this for, the better part of the last 2 weeks. And, here's what I would make out of it. It's obviously sad and unfortunate. Whatever is going on in Scot McCloughan's life, we start with that. Certainly we, offer condolences for his loss. But a lot of things are not adding up here in terms of the timeline, in terms of what Scott has said to reporters, including Brian, in terms of in terms of the death of his grandmother and the funeral services, in terms of what the team is saying. What
that's a lie. It's a lie. Let's come on.
Yeah.
Look, it's not. He's not at the combine because his grandmother passed away a month ago. His 100-year-old. That's just not true. There are other things going on. It's an open secret. We don't have to go into it here, but I mean, just do your own math on it. And again, it's important, I think, to realize what you say. This is not something that has happened sort of and developed overnight. These kinds of stories and these kind of rumblings have been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah, and I think that's, more than fair. I know we all hear things, but we don't, I would just say this from the radio station's perspective, and maybe I shouldn't exactly speak for the entire radio station, but, we vetted this story. We worked very hard on this story as a team to, corroborate all of this stuff that we were each individually being told, and here we are. Now, we should point out that Scot McCloughan is steadfastly denying it, that apparently, his agent denied it to Mike Jones early this morning. That is to be expected. The team has not denied it yet, which is interesting, and I think Brian McNally told you guys an hour ago or so that he asked the team for a comment on this story about McLuhan being sent home, and was told that they didn't know anything about it or had no comment or whatever the exact words were. So, I mean, whatever it is, everybody's going to deny it. We understand that.
That's how it works.
It doesn't mean that it's not true.
Right.
And it doesn't, and we have to put this timeline together, right, guys? Last Monday, February 20th, about 6 or so days after Chris Cooley's comments came out, that was also when the Redskins, we believe, from what I've heard, and the timeline makes sense, when they found out about the Jerry Brewer column, which really made Bruce Allen and the Redskins look bad, and also about the Jason Cole, Tony Romo story. For whatever that's worth, this is the timeline that we're working with here, so people can judge their own opinion.
So February 20th, okay, and Jerry Brewer is a guy that has ties, used to work in Seattle. We love Jerry, does great work for the Post. And the assumption, obviously, is that a lot of his sourcing on that was McLuhan. Everybody in town just sort of assumed, because of a previous relationship, that was a lot of the sourcing there. You'd heard through the grapevine, people sort of in the know had always said that Scott was a leaker here. So that was kind of irritating the Redskins front office. You can draw your own conclusion on that. What was the other incident that you mentioned?
The Jason Cole Bleacher Report, Tony Romo thing that the Redskins would be interested if things did not work out with, and there, I mean, look, I hate to accuse anybody of direct connections, but I mean, there's been a connection there, and, that caused a lot of friction, I guess in early February or late January as well. Again, this is an all-encompassing situation. We want to caution people, again, nobody's trying to, run from anything. I mean, there's a documented history of problems here, but this is an all-encompassing situation.
Right. I think it's also interesting, I'm sorry, Jason, was you're reporting that your source and our sources, and I say collectively the station, and that's Grant and you and Brian and everybody kind of digging behind the scenes, that this has kind of been going on for a while, and I've mentioned it several times. Your quote in here in your DC Hot Read article, that Bruce J., Alex Santos, and Doug Williams are running the Redskins. That's the quote.
Yeah.
GM Scot McCloughan has nothing to do with anything and has not for a very long time. Without saying who your source is, that is someone that would kind of know, correct?
Yes. And when we say does not have anything to do, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have a job. That doesn't mean that he hasn't been evaluating college talent. But the way it's been described to me by multiple people is essentially that. He's a personnel guy. He's not a general manager. He's not a decision maker. He's not, Jay Gruden has risen past him on the organizational ladder. And I was told early last week, right around the same exact timeline of February 20th into February 21st, that Doug Williams, the senior personnel executive, I know you guys have mentioned this part of the story a couple of times, also took on a greater role, a greater emphasized role in terms of the organizational depth chart and decision-making and workload because of this situation.
Right.
So do you think it's just a coincidence that Kirk was given the exclusive tag yesterday and, Scott has been, he hasn't been around for
He's been
a couple
diminished.
weeks. Do you think that's just a coincidence, or do you think there's some connection there?
I think there's a connection there, Jason. I mean, I didn't immediately think of that, but the more I thought about it, yes.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, and look, I think we can all say this. Bruce controls everything in that organization, and a lot of the financial elements of the Kirk Cousins situation last summer was Bruce and Dan and all that. But Scott wasn't 100% sold in any way, shape, or form, one. And I don't believe this year changed his mind very much, despite the passing numbers.